is going to be harder and more fun than you ever believed it was going to be. And so just relax and trust the process. And this is going to be an anchor for you at a time that's going to be so unbearably painful for you that you're going to be glad that you have this. You don't know that yet. So practice this well. Be grateful for it.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Follow to Lead podcast, a Christian leaders podcast powered by EBEB Solutions, energy benefits for every business. Go to ebebsolutions.com today and get your free energy audit. Tell them Tony sent you. Welcome. I'm so excited for today's podcast. But before we jump into that, let me remind you, today is the day that you should sign up for our Life and Leadership newsletter. Every single week, Wednesday, 7:30, 7 o'clock, we put out a newsletter that goes straight to your inbox that's full of some of my best content. And going into 2026, this place is where you're going to find all the PDFs that are going to accompany the podcast. So now's the time to sign up. Make sure you don't miss anything. We want to make sure that you're on the list, that you're getting the PDFs so your leadership can be transformed next year. I'm so excited for this project. I keep hinting at it. Something big is coming, and I want you to be a part of it. All right, let's jump into today's guest because I loved him. So here's the story. I wanted to read my own audiobook. They told me no. And then I found the guy who read it, and his name is Tom Parks. Turns out he's a pro. He's read more than 800 audiobooks. We talked about his unexpected kind of Genesis story. He opens up about how he stumbled into the whole thing, about how God has constantly been using him. He kind of offers a behind the scenes look into audiobooks, from preparation to performance and everything in between. We talk about the importance of communication for your audience. We also talk about the demanding creative work, personal life, and how you manage it all. I loved this dialogue with Tom. And at the end, he shares some very flattering words about my book, Wisdom in the Wound, which he read. And he did such a good job. If you haven't listened to it yet, please take some time to listen to it. Also, don't forget to hang on to the 3 and 5, 3 practical takeaways in 5 minutes or less. All right, here's a quick word from our partners, and then you get to listen to my conversation with the man that read my audiobook, Tom Parks. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited today to have a voice that you may be familiar with, the legendary audiobook narrator, Tom Parks. Tom, thank you so much for agreeing to be on the podcast today.
Well, thanks, Tony. It's great to be here. I'm going to try super hard to say things that aren't already written down for me because I'm used to reading other people's words. And so now I have to come up with some of my own. So we'll see how it goes.
Well, look, our friendship started because I was mad at you. So listen, podcast family, Tom is the gentleman who read my book and I wanted to read it. So I wanted to read my own book. The publisher said no. Or whoever makes those decisions, I'm not super familiar with it. And they were like, but don't worry, we've got this Tom Parks guy. And I was like, who's this Tom Parks guy? And then I started doing a little research. And Tom, you've read so many books. What's the official count?
You know, I'm up over 800 somewhere. And it kind of like I used to keep track of that. And then you reach this point of critical mass where it's like, I can keep counting books or I can just keep doing books. So I'm going to just keep doing books. But somebody actually went back and looked for something else I did and tells me that I've done over 800. So I'm going to just take their word for it.
I was doing a little prep for our dialogue today, and you did not start out in this field on purpose. It sounded like it came from accident. A church member opened up a door that would change your life forever. Can you tell us that story and why you decided to walk through it?
Yeah. So I was pastoring a church. And before I go any farther, just thanks for having me on. I'm still confused why I'm here. But anyway, so I was pastoring a church in West Michigan. You know that you're talking to somebody from Michigan because they go, yeah, I used to live here.
On the hand.
So I was pastoring a church there and, had no allusions to doing anything other than that. A gal in my church was looking for a job and she applied for a position as a receptionist at this place called Brilliance Publishing. And she didn't know what they did. I'd never heard of them and all that. So she went in and she was in the interview in this conference room and this woman came in holding this stack of spreadsheets. And she thought she was supposed to be in this meeting. And so she was confused when she walked in because she didn't recognize why the HR person was there with someone. And she looks at my friend and she says, do you know anybody you think could record an audiobook? And she goes, my pastor, I think maybe. And she said, good, have him call me. And then like she walks out the door. And my friend is like, the HR person, like, I don't know what just happened. She says, that's Colleen. This happens all the time. Don't worry about it. So anyway, she got Colleen's contact information. She gave it to me. And I called her and she said, yeah, send us a demo. And I went, okay. And I had to go on the internet and go, well, what's a demo look like? And so I had a handheld Zoom recorder.
Yeah, you did.
And I read like an entire chapter of Blue Like Jazz or something and sent it to them. And then nothing happened for a year. And then a year later, it was like Wednesday night at 10 o'clock. I just, we'd had church Wednesday night and I got everything cleaned up and was just walking in the door to home. And it's another producer from Brilliance. And she says, hey, we listened to your demo finally, and we think you could do this. Are you doing anything tomorrow? And I said, well, that happens to be my day off. She said, could you come in the morning and audition for some things? So I went in and I auditioned for 3 or 4 titles. And then she said, can you stay and record one of these right now? I said, I guess. And then she handed me a contract and went, holy cow, that's a lot of money for sitting here talking, but okay. And so I recorded a book called Anything But Typical. It's by Nora Raleigh Basket. It's a young adult title about a young boy who's on the spectrum. And apparently I channeled on the spectrum really well. And like my very first book won this award and everybody's making a big deal out of it. And I literally was so much of an outsider. I'm like, okay, I guess that's great. Thanks. But anyway, they started hiring me and I'd go in like every couple of months. They'd have me come in and do a title. And then a guy who used to be an engineer for them who went to work for Zondervan back when Zondervan was still on its own. He was in charge of their audiobook program. And he was talking to one of the engineers at Brilliance. He said, yeah, we just had this terrible thing happen. We had an audiobook on the Hosea. And he said, I used a narrator I've used before. He said, we never checked the title. He did it. We put it up for sale. And he said, within minutes, I'm getting complaints because he said Jose instead of Hosea all the way through. Yeah. And this engineer at Brilliance is like, well, we got this pastor who's working for us. I bet he wouldn't do that. And so Brad contacted me and he said, do you have a home studio? And I said, no. And he said, well, we'll help you with that. So he helped with the guidelines. So I worked out of my master bedroom closet for a year, making enough money to be able to build a booth and all those kinds of things. And then he knew the folks at Christian Audio. And so he's like, hey, we got this pastor who's doing this for us. And then Christian Audio was bought by Tantor and Zondervan was bought by Thomas Nelson and Thomas Nelson was bought by HarperCollins. And it just all kind of blossomed. One thing led to the next. And so I did my first book in 2009. Wow. And in 2013, I got to an interesting place in ministry where I felt like I was in a church where I could have stayed the rest of my life. I loved them. They loved me. They loved my family. We were having a great time. We had no conflict. We were having fun. But I realized like I'd run out of things. My vision, everything I'd felt like I had been sent there to do had been accomplished. I didn't know what was the next step, and God didn't seem to really be revealing anything. And I knew I could stay, but I'd seen pastors that had done that. Yeah. And they had happy times, but there wasn't a lot of kingdom stuff happening. And so I didn't feel like God was leading me on to anything beyond that. And so I resigned the church and I started doing the audiobook thing full time. That was in 2013. And that's been basically my full-time gig ever since.
It's a fascinating idea. I think that there are a lot of leaders who are listening who get to that place where things are going okay, but yet they don't feel like they're actually taking ground.
Yeah.
And I think it's a brave moment when someone says, I'm going to sacrifice something that is really good for something that I don't know, but it could be great. Talk to me through your decision-making process in that moment, right? Because obviously one of the things from my understanding about the audio work, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's gig work. So the gigs have to come in order for you to get paid. I'm sure that your wife had some things to think or say about the idea of giving up stability for gig work.
Yeah. So prior to pastoring, we were involved in itinerant work. So we traveled from church to church. We lived in an old Greyhound bus, 3 kids, homeschooled, did the whole thing.
Wow.
And always went on love offerings. So it was kind of like whatever you raise, we'll take. We never had a set minimum. You got to give us this much to come in. Some churches had budgets. A lot of churches didn't. Then they literally just gave you whatever came in. And so we had lived that life for a number of years before going into the pastorate. So I think that there was maybe a common understanding that if you're faithful to God, it won't always be easy, but at the end of the day, God doesn't just drop you on your head.
That's so good.
And so, the process of moving out of ministry was, I think, because we'd been down that faith road in the past, that wasn't so much of a stretch. And so I think that for all of us as followers of Jesus, we talk a lot about this bidding that Christ says, if anyone wants to be my follower, here's what you got to do. Yeah. You got to deny yourself, and you got to take up your cross, and you got to follow me. And I think we forget that when you take up a cross, you're only going one place, and it's to die. I mean, like, nobody just carries a cross for the heck of it, right? And so, especially if we're following Jesus, and he's got his cross and we got our cross and we're following him, we know where the destination is. Like, this is not just a shibboleth or a cool saying. Like if you're going to do this, this means dying. Right. And so in this life, that means that my agenda at that point is not the point. And so it's what's best for the kingdom. And so, it can sound very noble to say, well, I did what was best for the kingdom rather than what was best for me. But the reality is, if I'm doing what's best for the kingdom, I'm also doing concomitantly what's best for me. And so I think that, having had very, very godly parents, we can talk about them too if you want to, but, who modeled this before me, having seen the faithfulness of God, during the days of itinerant work, having seen the amazing way that God worked in the church that I was pastoring, it was easy to step out of the way and say, it's your church. I'm just an interim here. I'm just temporary. You're the long-term permanent shepherd, not me. And so it's time for me to get out of the way so you can do what you're going to do next.
Yeah, one of my core beliefs is that the church, my kids, all the things that I'm involved in already have a savior, and it's not me.
Right.
It's a constant process of letting myself off the hook, of being the person that has to hold all of this together. And I think sometimes a lot of leaders kind of lean into this, I'm responsible feeling. Well, you're stewarding, but you may not be the owner. And I think that that's probably a key delineation that I think you call out really well there. One of the things I'm curious about is the actual process of recording a book. According to your notes on Facebook, you recorded 60 audiobooks last year alone. So 2024, you lectured. We're going to get to the cruise ships in a second because I'm fascinated by this.
Okay.
You lectured on 50 cruise ships. You 50 times. You recorded 60 audiobooks. You spent more time, over 75,000 miles traveling by car, plane, ship, and horse. I appreciate that you put that in there.
Thanks.
It visited 9 countries, 1 new continent. And then already in this year, you went to Antarctica.
Yeah.
Tell me about the process of doing this and how you've interwoven it to what appears to be a very adventurous life. You've taken a business that seems to be very tied to importance of environment and sound, and you've now blown it up into this adventurous lifestyle where you and Nan, traipse all over the world.
Right. So, boy, you asked a lot of questions.
Yeah, I did. I stacked. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Let's start
okay.
Take us through the process.
Yeah. So it is fine because I love telling stories. And
that's
so
great.
Everything always gets couched in terms of stories. So I have, I think I have the type of personality that does okay being by myself, being self-motivated, those kinds of things. And so, part of the process is you have to kind of have that kind of personality. You have to be comfortable spending time with yourself for long periods of time. Because I sit inside, I flew put the background up because my background is very boring because I'm literally sitting inside of a padded room right now, which is where I spend all of my time every day. And so, I have to get work. I have to, cultivate relationships with people who are the ones who send out the work. I have to do the research to prep the book to make sure it's ready to go. I have to have some facility with the technology to be able to record the book. I don't do any of the editing or proofing of that because I'm terrible at it, and there are other people who are really good. And just like I want to be recognized and honored for the gifts that God has given me and what I'm capable of doing, I want to simultaneously honor those same gifts in others. And so, there are some people that are really good with technology and they're really good at editing audiobooks, and they deserve to make a living doing that. And so I hire them to do that because I can't do what they do and I don't want them doing what I do. So we work together to facilitates the process. So, there's a lot of time spent in the padded room saying other people's words. There is the editing process that's handled by other people. There is a process of listening to it for proofing purposes to catch any errors and the copious number of errors that I make, sending those back so I can re-record those things. It goes back to the editor. The editor puts it all together, does magic, masters it, sends it off to the company that releases it. So the process of making the audiobook is pretty systematized. I mean, everybody knows their role. I have my role. My role is, and I'm an early morning person. You have no idea, Tony. I actually put on pants for you this morning because normally I'm sitting in my booth and who knows what's happening. But, this is my discipline, is that end of the piece. It's sitting in here and trying to channel the author, so there's some acting that's involved in terms of, trying to capture your voice versus someone else's voice. When I recorded your book, it's, trying to get a sense of your tone and your personality. And, you have little witty, witty may be overstretching it.
That's fair.
Witty things that you throw in there and stuff like that. So it's like, yeah. And so it's breaking the tension of the heavy thing you're saying with that. And so it's recognized, okay, this is who this author is. And so how can I be appropriately heavy at the heavy times and then be cheeky at the cheeky times to give the listener time to take a beat and then go back into the topic at hand. And so that's kind of the process in a nutshell of doing the audiobook. And I think it's, a lot of people think, well, it's just saying the words, and, you have to be able to say the words. But I think there's also that ability to try to inside the mind of the author. And especially in this day and age, almost 100% of what I do now is nonfiction. And so it's very much trying to determine, okay, is this an academic book? Is this a conversational book? Is this a therapeutic book? Is this an amusing book? Is this a self-help? What's the style here, and trying to reflect that accordingly.
How much? So let's just use my book because I know a lot of my podcast family will be familiar with it. How long does it take to actually weave all of that together? Because I would imagine there's the pre-work, there's the reading, there's the edits, there's the going back. I mean, just listening to it regularly is, I think it recorded at like 3:58. By the way, you did a wonderful job. You absolutely crushed it, right? Like,
thanks.
I was reading it going, oh, this obviously he's gifted at what he does. How long does it take you to put all that together?
Yeah, I mean, the actual time in the booth, I mean, yours was recorded in a day. I probably started, because I'm an early morning person. I probably started on yours by 6 a.m, and with a break for breakfast and everything else, I was probably done by noon with the actual recording. An hour or so the night before, just prepping it, reviewing it, trying to get a sense of what it was, realizing this is not a technical book that I'm going to have to go look up a bunch of technical terms and vocabulary and things like that. And then when it went from me to the editor, I think from the time I was done recording till the time it was ready for sale was probably a 2-week period of time.
That's insane.
And actually, and that's the publisher handled the editing and the proofing on that one. So when we do stuff in-house, we can turn stuff around pretty quickly. I've got good engineers and proofers that can turn stuff around. So we've gotten some hot titles where it's been like, can you get this done like the day before yesterday? And the answer is yes, we can, because we've got good people who do really good work.
When you start working on these kind of projects, I would imagine reading over 800 books, it has to take a toll on your brain and because you're not just reading, you're also thinking like the author. And so right. I'm sure there's a little bit of internalizing it. How do you compartmentalize the work from the brain and how it all fits together?
Yeah, that's a great question, because there are a lot of books that don't, because they just don't apply. I read one last week or the week before, and it was a description of the electric power grid system in North America. There's not a lot of internalization going on with that. Right. Boy, let me tell you. Your book, for example, I found my brain constantly background processing what was going on as I was saying the words about, what are my own wounds and what are the things that are going on in my life and what are the triggers that hit me at different points in time and all that. I'm grateful because I have a wife who loves Jesus more than she loves me.
Oh, praise God.
And so when I have my, times with her, because we eat every meal together, she works for me managing another side of my business. We eat all of our meals together. We take breaks together. We walk together, those kinds of things. So there's a lot of time for that verbal processing. Because I am a verbal processor, I'm more of it's background processing. But then when I'm ready to deal with it, I learn about me by the words that are coming out of my mouth. And my dear wife, who is a wonderful, godly woman, but also a painfully shy introvert who really just doesn't like people in the sense of just don't come talk to me, don't look at me, don't bother me. It's not that she thinks like people are terrible human beings. It's don't notice me, all those kinds of things. So my poor wife gets to listen to her verbal processor husband do all this. And I'll say, so what do you think? And she'll go, yeah. So it's a really good relationship. We actually do quite well together.
That's really amazing. Are there titles that you say no to? One of the things I heard in an interview that you did, I think it was probably a couple years ago, was that you learned that there are certain genres or areas that you should just stay away from, that you're not really that gifted at. How do you discern the right yeses and the right nos as things come across your desk?
Yeah, I think that this is probably true for anyone who's in any position of leadership. Some of it you have to just learn through experience. You get yourself into something and you go, I shouldn't be here. And I can't necessarily beg out of it now because I'm in, but I don't have to take this the next time. And I think as leaders in any organization, we all face these kinds of issues. There are things that we get into, and as a matter of integrity, because we gave our word, we will see it through, unless it's just something so morally abhorrent that we can't. But hopefully we learn from that so that in the future, we have enough confidence in, who we are in Christ that we can say, but I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to take that road again, or I'm not going to allow myself to be put in that position. I'm going to have enough boundaries around me and enough confidence, again, in who I am in Christ, because, again, the same Christ who bids us to come and die does not say, also what I need you to do is be a passive patsy and just let people, slap you and whip you. There's a difference, I think, between turning the other cheek and being forgiving and being graceful and being merciful toward others, and then, just laying down and letting ourselves be so consumed that we just say yes to everything that we have to do. Because there's a lot of things we would say yes to that we probably should say no to be authentically faithful to who God has called us to be. So, for me, that's part of the process. And again, with experience, and also with some tenure in the industry, I have built up enough relationships with my producers. And this might be only happened once or twice where I've gotten into a book and I've had to just contact them and say, I can't I mean, I told you I would, but truly in this situation, I just can't.
Wow.
And most of my producers, because they know who I am, they know not to ask me to do certain things. But every once in a while, because they may not be faith-based themselves, they may not have a relationship with Christ, they have a very broad understanding of what it means to be a follower of Jesus. And so they'll send something my way, and maybe I don't vet it carefully enough or something. And so I've been fortunate to have relationships with them that if I say I just can't, they've been okay. And there've been a couple I've had to just suck it up and push through and go, that was stupid. I should have never done this.
So good. One of the things that's become clear to me as I've gotten to know your story more and more is that it seems like your mission is less about just reading audiobooks or that kind of things, but it's more about communicating in a way that people can receive it. And I think that that's such an important lesson for leaders to absorb. So let's say that you're sitting across from a young leader and they're in the tension because they don't feel like their messages are being received very well. What are some of your go-to rules around communication so that it can be received in a way that leads to movement?
This may seem weird coming from me because I feel like I've been monologuing a lot, but I think that sometimes, especially in our youth, we're so anxious to prove that we can, that we don't take nearly long enough to just stop and listen to the other person to hear what it is that is going to resonate with them, as well as what the best way of presenting to them is going to be. You know, I've now been married twice. My communication with my second wife is very different than my communication with my first wife because they're two very different people. They have two very different personalities. They have two different gift sets, gift mixes, you know, and so when I got married the second time, I couldn't talk to Nan the same way that I talked to my first wife because it would not connect with her. It would not be meaningful to her. I might be saying the same things, might mean the same thing, but if she can't hear it, then I'm not communicating. And so if I'm in a leadership position, if I'm a young leader and I feel like my message isn't landing, it's probably, the problem is probably not the message itself. It's probably the way that I'm communicating the message. Is it connecting with that particular individual? So how can I stop talking long enough and listen to the other person to find out what do they really need to know? How can I communicate this to that person that's going to make sense to her or him rather than just communicating in the way that makes the most sense to me, which I think is our default. And I think particularly, especially if somebody tells you you're gifted at communicating.
Right.
You know, it's easy to think, well, man, I must be really good at this. So if you're not getting the message, you're just not paying attention. Well, maybe I am a very gifted communicator to the person who said that about me, but that doesn't mean I'm a gifted communicator to everybody. And so I have to find ways to learn who my audience is. You know, you made a reference to this. I do some lecturing on cruise ships. And if I'm on brand A, I have to understand who's the clientele and what are their expectations. Why did they take this trip? What are they hoping to accomplish? If this is a 10-day cruise to the Caribbean where we're just looking to get away from home and we want some time at the beach and we're going to be drinking a lot of margaritas and rum punches, that's a different crowd than we're doing the Norwegian fjords and we want to be blown away by the awesomeness of this place where we are. And this is a bucket list kind of trip. Like, we're never coming back here again. We've been saving for years for this. Those are two very different crowds. They have two very different expectations coming in to hear me speak. And so my communication style needs to be very different, you know, based on those, you know, what I perceive to be the expectations. And that's on me. That's on me to read that as a communicator, to learn what they're saying. So whether it's an individual or a group, and I think, Tony, don't you find that this is true for you? Because you speak publicly.
Sure.
You know, if you're speaking to a church in Milwaukee, versus a church in Birmingham.
Very different.
You're going to have very different, different communication styles, all that, versus speaking to a corporate gathering versus a TED Talk type event versus a gathering where there's going to be breakout sessions to talk about what you're doing afterward or workshops. I mean, communication is all about not what I'm saying as I sit here monologuing again, but it's about who's my audience and who am I talking to and what do I need to say to them and how do I need to say it so they can really understand what I'm trying to get across.
I think that's 100% true. And I think oftentimes I begin praying for the audience that I'm going to be in front of days before. And I think about them and I'm like, I wonder what they're doing right now. I wonder what they're preparing for. I wonder what they're bringing into this room. I wonder, just try to stay, curious as much as I can about the people that I'm in front of. You mentioned the cruises. Every leader I know right now is going, wait, how do I become a lecturer on a cruise ship? Right. So tell us about how that opportunity opened up. It seems as if, and this could just be a misread on my part. If it is, just let me know that you've created some deep connections through cruising, and the people who are kind of like just outside of your world, I would call them internet friends, in using some of my language, you've seemed to develop a big relationship with them. So how did you get into cruising? And then how did you manage those relationships?
Yeah, so much like the audiobooks, I stumbled into it. I was on my way to Barcelona for my, I think, fourth cruise I'd ever taken. It was going to be a transatlantic. I was in the Chicago airport. There was a guy wearing a carnival ball cap. We started talking. At LaGuardia, our flight was delayed because the bathroom wasn't working or something. They gave us meal vouchers. I sat at a table with him, found out he was an enrichment lecturer on a cruise ship. I said, oh, that's great. I have no idea what that is.
Yeah.
And so he explained to me, he said, what do you do? I said, I record audiobooks and I do some, I pastor, so just preaching. And he's like, well, he says, my whole thing on this entire cruise is going to be about storytelling. He said, you should come up on stage. We'll do a bit together. So he had me come up on stage. We did some, he kind of interviewed me and we told some stories and all that. Walking off stage, cruise director said, hey, can I get your contact info? Sure. Didn't think about it. Again, year later, I get a call from somebody at the cruise line's office and wants to talk to me about booking a cruise. And I listened and I said, look, you're not my normal guy who calls me to book cruises. Thank you. I'm already got a cruise booked to go to Alaska. I mean, maybe we'll do some more in the future. And he says, no, I want to pay you to come on. Like I want to book you to come on as a lecturer to work for us. And I said, oh, okay. So I'm going to need you to go back and say everything you said again, and I'm going to actually pay attention this time. So that's how I got started in it. It's the relational thing is interesting because this is maybe the most awkward and uncomfortable point for me. I've never enjoyed like when I was a pastor, they put my name on the front of the church. And it's like, this is not my church. Why in the world is my name on the sign? Not a personal world is going to come to this church because I'm the pastor. And if they are, they're here for the wrong reason. So make that go away. I've just never been comfortable with that. And so when you're doing the cruise ship thing and, you're in a lounge and there are 3,000 people in there and you're doing a thing and, I make my Facebook information available. So if they want to follow my adventures or those kinds of things, they can. There's always some that are people you think, in real life, we could actually be, I think, genuine friends. And there are people that I look forward to seeing again and again and again. And then there are other people that are just weird.
Yep.
And so, that's the hard part to manage with all of that. But it's been cool, some of the kingdom connections, because people, I never from the stage I mentioned I used to be a pastor or something like that, but there's no overt sharing of the gospel from the stage. But I did a cruise this past April with a bunch of Australians, and they of course were very intrigued by what's going on in the US with political stuff. And they find out you're an American and you seem reasonable, so I can ask you questions. And I had a woman who said, so on the whole, do you think humanity is getting worse? And then we're seeing this. And so I reached down, I took off my name badge, and I put it on the table, and I said, I'm no longer speaking as representative of the cruise line, but as a former pastor and a theologian, let's talk about original sin. And like, this was something she'd never heard of before. Oh, wow. And God opened up this opportunity. So, I'd love to say that I led her in the sinner's prayer. I think I planted a seed.
Sure.
Somebody else will maybe do some watering, and someday there will be a harvest. Those are the moments that are so gratifying and so fun when you get to have a Jesus-y conversation with someone.
It's amazing.
We wandered far from the question.
No, it's perfect. It's perfect. Yeah. It led me to this idea of about being a constant learner. And it seems as if as I've kind of done some of my research on your life, is that you're constantly learning, you're constantly leaning in. I feel like, doing over 400 podcast episodes has given me like a PhD in leadership and just talking to wise people like yourself. And I can't imagine what reading 800 audiobooks has done to your learning.
Go ahead. Ask me a question about the North American electric power grid.
I've done a horrible job of stacking questions, so I'm not going to stop today. I'm just going to keep going.
Okay. All right.
So the two questions that I wanted to ask around this topic are, how much of the audiobooks do you think you retain? And how much has reading 800 audiobooks changed your life?
Yeah. The retention issue is interesting because there are bits and pieces that certainly get retained, but quite often I honestly, like, I remember the Power Grid book because it's an anomaly.
Sure.
I honestly couldn't tell you what the last book that I recorded was, because it's kind of, you're constantly moving forward to the next thing. And so it's at a point where the things that stick out aren't things like titles and authors. What sticks out is, was there a principle in this book or a factoid in this book that I found fascinating? I'm going to go back to the electrical power grid book because this is an interesting metaphor for me. I did not know that electric power is only generated when there is demand and it's called for. So unlike natural gas or water, where there's a reserve and we're pulling from that reserve, there is no reserve in the electric grid. And so when power is needed, it's available and you tap into it. And as a follower of Jesus, as a business owner, I was thinking about how true that is in terms of our relationship with Christ. I mean, yes, there is a reserve, but sometimes the reserve is run dry, and there's just nothing more left to give. And yet, if we tap into the power source, it isn't a demand power source that's always available. It's always ready to generate more for us. And so, that metaphor is what sticks in my mind. And so those are the things that I start thinking about. How does that make a difference for me as a follower of Jesus? How does that make a difference in terms of how I'm treating other people? If I just am tired of sitting in the padded room, I'm just tired. I'm tired of the sound of my own voice. My brain is tired. My back is sore. My voice is just weary. But I've got Tony Miltenberger's book on, wisdom in the wound. And this is a significant book that can make a significant difference in people's lives. And I need to give it the very best that it can get, but I'm out. Thank goodness there's still a power source in terms of the Spirit that can imbue that reading even when I'm tired and do something with it that I cannot do with it myself. That's beyond my abilities. That's beyond what I'm capable of putting into it, either because I'm just me or because I'm me in a very tired state. And so, in my marriage, there are times when I'm just tired and cranky. And really what I want to do is I just want to sit with some ice cream and just feel sorry for myself. But I said to this woman, you are the most important person in my life other than Jesus. And so you deserve my best. And my best right now isn't great. So I better tap into a power source to do it. So when you ask me about the impact, I think that I am who I am today, largely because of these moments here and there where I've encountered something in something that I've read, or if it's on a ship, a conversation that I've had with another person, or research for a topic that I'm presenting on the ship, or traveling. And this is what I love about traveling is I get to interact with people who don't look and sound like me.
Yeah, that's so good.
So
that's so good. How do you take notes afterwards if there's stuff you want to remember? Like, just practically speaking, like, is there like something like you get out and you're like, oh, I got to remember that about the power grid, or that could be really good. And because I would imagine there's a contrast between consuming content and then the creation of content that you need to do for your lecture series. And they feel like they're different parts of your brains. Right. How do you manage both sides?
Yeah, I think that, again, being a verbal processor, I think how it gets contextualized for me, my learning style, is through the verbal processing. So if I can get out and talk about it and use it quickly, then it becomes a part of me. The research, like for the lectures and stuff like that, is maybe a different muscle set. Although, there's the verbal component of rehearsal and things like that. I rehearse my lectures before I go out and do them. I mean, I don't just go, okay, yeah, I think I got enough info. Hey, Chat GPT, write me a lecture about this and make some good slides. Yeah, I got this. No, there's a lot of rehearsal and things like that goes into any public performance, because it is a performance. It's when we stand up in front of people, it's performative. And even as a pastor, I always rehearse my sermons multiple times before I stood in the pulpit and the congregation heard. That doesn't mean that that's exactly what they heard.
Sure.
Because the Spirit sometimes leads you in different directions. But, I never wanted to go in unrehearsed, unprepared, to be able to handle the material confidently.
So good. I have so many more questions. I'm going to put a pin in it now. For now, though, I do have one more question for you before I let you go. And I know prior to that, the bold ones are going to want to connect with you all over the interwebs. Where is the best place to learn all things Tom Parks?
So I have a Facebook page.
I notice you don't have a website at all, do you?
I don't have a website or anything. It's really
I desperately want to create one for you.
I have other audiobook narrators that'll, they want me to coach them or something, like they're getting started, and they'll say, tell me about your webpage. It's like, don't have one. Because it's personal. It's relational. I feel like everything that I have done, was the cruises, whether it was ministry, whether it was doing itinerant work or anything, it's always been relational. And I've got such a big God that, there's a part of my personality. You got to know, Tony, there's a huge ego inside of this brain that really wants to be about self-promotion and get myself out there and get noticed for things and, do more and more of this and more of that and all that kind of stuff. And I feel like one of the lessons that God has said to me was, why don't you just shut up and let me take care of that? Why don't you do what you're really good at? And let me worry about promoting you. Let me worry about people noticing you. Let me worry about the connections. Once I give you the connections, take super good care of them. Because these are people I made. And you are not to use them. I didn't make these people so you could use them to accomplish other things. I didn't make you to be a networker to just use other people, in networking ways. These are real human beings. So value those relationships, and I'll take care of the rest. And the remarkable thing is I cannot think of it. Like, I've done the rounds where I've sent emails off to publishers for audiobooks to say, hey, I do audiobooks. Would you have me? I honestly cannot think of a single time I've ever gotten a publisher to hire me that way. It's all been relational, word of mouth. Same thing with the cruise ships. Like, I've never gone out looking for work on the ships. It's this person knows that person at that company, and that person's looking for this, and they're having a conversation. And then out of the blue, I get a contact, and they're like, hey, would you want to come do your shtick for us? And it's like, yeah, I would. And so when you say, find me, absolutely, please. I'd love to talk to you. It's probably abnormally difficult for whatever reasons, but I got a big God, and I've just kind of always left that in his hand. Because if not, I would I think I told you in an email, every single good thing that has happened to me has been an amazing display of God's grace and mercy. And every terrible thing that has happened to me has been because I screwed up. I got out of my lane and I screwed up and I brought it on myself.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so true. That's such good wisdom. So we'll link to Tom's Facebook page in the show notes. And it's an adventure watching you adventure. And so that's super fun. Okay, last question I love to ask people. It's an advice question. Okay. I'm going to invite you to go back in time and give yourself one piece of advice, but I get to name the season of life that you're in. Okay. So I want to take you back to the day where you read your first audiobook, book number 1. You probably still remember the book, or at least some vague parts of it. That's back when technology required you to go in and you couldn't do everything remotely. And now everything's changed and continues to change, which is wonderful and scary. So if you could go back in time and sit with that younger version of Tom, sit knee to knee with him, hold his hands, look him in the eyes, and give him one piece of advice about the journey he's going to go on, knowing that it won't change anything externally, but it could change everything internally, what would you tell him?
This is going to be harder and more fun than you ever believed it was going to be. And so just relax and trust the process. And this is going to be an anchor for you at a time that's going to be so unbearably painful for you that you're going to be glad that you have this. You don't know that yet. So practice this well. Be grateful for it. Take it all in. Don't ever lose your sense of wonder and awe that you get to do this. And then just trust me with the process.
Beautiful. And amen. Tom, thank you so much for being so generous, for accepting my random friend request and then immediately shooting me a message that it's a sign of your gift of hospitality and your desire for a relationship.
And if I can say thanks so much for having me. And I don't, I've only said the title of your book like twice, but if you haven't gone out and bought a copy of Tony Miltenberger's, Wisdom in the Wound, you need to go out and buy it. Don't wait for Tony to send you a free copy, okay? Tony doesn't need to be buying copies and sending them to you for free. Go out and pay your own money. It's fine. You can get it on Amazon. It's not expensive. Get a copy. And then, if you get bored reading, buy the audio version from Audible.
Yeah.
And you can do both, and you can be riding in the car and you can listen to it multiple times. You can hear it in your own voice. You can hear it in my voice, and maybe it'll internalize. It will change your life. It's a great book. So you need to go out and do it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
I told you guys, what a great conversation. And doesn't he have a voice for audiobooks? So good. There are so many places to pick up the audiobook. Audible's easy. Spotify, I think it might be free if you have a premium membership. And so many different ways that you can listen to the book and hear Tom's amazing voice even more. Now, here are the 3 practical takeaways. 3 things that you can do this week to transform yourself into being a more intentional leader. Number 1, adapt your communication to your audience. Great leadership isn't about speaking loudly. It's about speaking clearly in a way that others can receive it. I know this is true because every time I think I'm a great communicator, I talk to my teenager and I learn something different. So adapt your communication to your audience. Number 2, value relationships more than self-promotion. I love the way Tom talked about this and how it opened up doors that he never would have imagined. The people around you matter so much more than the promotion you're going to get. Success is built on long-term trust. Number 3, trust the process, enjoy the journey. Oh man, what a great line for 2025. Trust the process, enjoy the journey. Tom's career kind of shifted from one spot to another because he was open to what God has in store for him. Are you open? If God wanted you to pivot today, could you pivot? All right, let's revisit the 3 practical takeaways. Number 1, adapt your communication to your audience. Number 2, value your relationships more than self-promotion. Number 3, trust the process, enjoy the journey. Well, friends, that's our podcast for today. As always, I'm forever thankful for you. I'd love to hear which one of the takeaways you're going to work on this week. Email me, tony@twmilt.com, or just reply to our weekly email where you're getting all the information about what's happening in our communities. Thank you for being one of the bold ones. And remember, guys, if you want to follow Jesus, you must be willing to move.